So questions you need to ask yourself.
So who was the client? Was it an AMC? Was it a state licensing agency? Was it FHA? Was it a GSE, FDIC, etc.? How come they reviewed your appraisal? You know, just like Chuck said in his presentation earlier, you know, there's always a theme. You know, so before you can proceed with the case, what's the theme? So before you can respond to the review or the negative review that you may or may not have received, you want to make sure is, why was my appraisal reviewed? Are they asking me about regulatory requirements? Did the loan default? Did someone file a complaint with the state licensing agency?
I'll tell you, if you're like me, the first thing that happens is my blood pressure goes up, my face turns red, I want satisfaction and revenge. Sorry. Okay. So, did you receive a copy of the review? And that's very important. Sometimes if you just get an email from a lender saying a negative review came back and here's what they're targeting, they want you to respond, don't work off an email. Demand to see the actual review. But sometimes that's all you're going to get is just a letter, especially when the GSEs do their buybacks, and you're going to see them in our samples later. They're not giving you very much information at all in terms of letting you sometimes even see a review. They just have people looking at these and targeting things in the report that they think would cause it not to be in compliance with the issues in their selling guide for appraisals.
Right, and another thing you want to keep in mind too with the reviews is if you were doing it for an appraisal management company, it might be they're not doing the quality assurance review or the technical review. They're just doing more of the administrative. They might be working off a checklist, and so they didn't even deliver the review to the client yet. So try not to confuse the two, because, you know, all in all, there are some legitimate and real good AMCs out there who have full-time appraisers like yourselves out there who are reviewing the work, and they're reviewing them for client guidelines. So when they come back in and they say, hey, listen, you need to explain better why you had to go over a mile away, or you know, comment Google Earth is showing that there's some external obsolescence, or there might be, you know, because there's train tracks down the end of the block and you didn't comment on that. Try not to take that so negative. They're really looking out for your best interest when it comes to the role that they're playing, because they're just trying to make your report that much better. So, you know, you know, like Tim said, everybody's blood pressure goes up and we all get defensive from time to time, but when it's on that level, when they're trying to help you make your report a better quality, be as cooperative as you can.
In terms of whether or not you're being asked to comment on the review, sometimes the lender may say, well, we don't know what we're going to do with it, we just wanted you to see what's going on. I think as an appraiser and using due diligence, you need to push that lender and say, I'd like to see a copy of the review, I'd like to have the opportunity to comment. I don't think that's something that you want to say, shoo, I just dodged a bullet, because you don't know where it's going to go from there. And at least you have the opportunity to maybe get your hands on the review and stop it in its tracks as soon as you do. The other issue is the entity asking you to comment on this, was it your client? Was it one of the intended users? Because if it isn't, if it's somebody else, you may be getting yourself in trouble with USPAP under confidentiality. We just did something in the state of Illinois. We checked on federal mandates and state mandates, and what we found out was if two banks merge together as an agreement, and then they accept the name of one of the banks that are merged, but not the lesser bank, that's still considered the same client under federal law. But if a bank fails and their assets are sold off to another bank, that new bank who buys the assets is not an extension of that first client. That first client is who you have a responsibility to, even though they're not there anymore. They're gone. So don't be too quick to say, I can't respond because that's not the name of who my bank was 6 years ago. You have to determine if it was a legitimate merger or if it was just an asset acquisition.
And before you move on there was a story, and I won't say, you know, who the investor was, but that was exactly the case. The original bank went under, another bank acquired their assets, and they contacted, you know, one of our affiliates, and they wanted the appraisers to comment about their appraisal report that they did, you know, a year and a half ago, and we said, absolutely not. You were not one of the original clients. So then the chief appraiser of that bank got on the phone and started threatening my affiliate and said, hey, you want to play that USPAP game? And he says, well, I'll tell you what, you don't respond, then you're going on my exclusionary list. And so then I got the call, and then I got on the phone with that chief appraiser and say, hey, what are you doing? You can't bully them, There's different approaches here, when you're looking at it.
Okay. And by the way, that's called an Aunt Melly story, what Tommy just did, and we're going to try not to have too many more of those for the rest of the presentation. So, remember always, as an appraiser, you have to protect the confidential nature of the client and the appraiser relationship. We can point you to the USPAP. It simply says an appraiser must not disclose confidential information or assignment results to anyone other than, and it gives you a list of specific people, your client, persons that are authorized by the client for you to discuss it with, state appraisal regulatory agencies if a complaint is made against you, third parties that can be authorized by due process of law, that would be our courts, or duly authorized professionals or peer review committees. I think NAFA probably has something like that, the Institute does, but if someone turns you in with one of your reports to your own organization, we are allowed to also open an investigation on it. So back to questions you need to keep asking yourself.
So how should I respond? So should you respond by a phone, an email, letter, in the original appraisal report, or not at all? Like I said, you have to figure out what the theme is here prior to your responding, how you respond on that thing. And there's another slide in here coming up. Do I need to contact my E&O insurance before? So if the review, this was a different bullet point, somewhat related. So if the review provided a different value conclusion, can I comment on it without performing a standard 3 review? And the answer is sure you can, because your appraisal was your own value development on it. So if the client comes back and asks you, so okay, we just had a review and they're saying your value isn't where it should be, comment on the value in this review. And you can do that because you already developed your own value opinion. So what if I completed the appraisal over 5 years ago? USPAP says that you have to keep your work file for 5 years, and at least 2 years after any final disposition of judicial proceedings. There's kind of a mixed thought process here on this. I mean, you'll talk to some appraisal instructors and other appraisers, and they're saying, hey, 5-year date comes by, boom, I'm shredding it all. But based on some prior discussions I've had with the FBI, who have done some presentations for me, they said, if you were fraudulent and you did something that was criminal, knowingly, willingly, intentionally, you can't hide behind that 5-year rule. We don't care if it was 10 years ago or 12 years ago. We're going to bring criminal charges up on you. So while it's nice to have the USPAP, hey, after 5 years, get rid of it, at the same time, could also help you protect yourself. Because if you get a repurchase demand, and Tim gave the example of 4 years and 11 months, but we're still seeing them from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac going back to 2003. Heck, that's 2003. And so now you have to answer questions about something you did from back then. Even if you got rid of your file, you can't answer them. But the process still doesn't stop because you don't have your file. They still go ahead and proceed with it. But if you did have your file, now you can look at your notes. You have your work file. Remember, your work file is your most important piece in your appraisal assignment because it has all your development data in there, which will help you put together a good response.
And now looking at it just from the other side, the first slide says, do I need an attorney? An attorney might even tell you that if you get rid of your reports after 5 years, and then you are brought into court to testify, and the opposing counsel walks up and says, is this a copy of your appraisal? Your answer is going to be, I don't know. I don't know if it is or isn't because I don't have a copy to be able to verify if that's the original true copy of my report. And from there, it just spirals right downhill. You can't answer anything about this appraisal because you can't identify it as your own. So there is protections by getting rid of this stuff, but then in other cases, if you don't have it, they can paint a bad picture of you if they want.